Georgia lawyers Bob and Irreverent D talk law. Listen up for stories about how things really happen in our legal system. Who are these guys? Dwayne Singleton, Irreverent D, is a criminal defense attorney in the state of Georgia. Benjamin O. Benson, a.k.a. Bob, is a personal injury attorney in Atlanta. On today's episode, Bob and Irreverent D become screenagers.
Can we do like a selfie of us filming?
Taking a selfie?
I'm taking a selfie. Are you taking a picture of me taking a selfie?
Yeah.
Are you selfie? I've got perfect arms for selfies.
Do you?
Yeah.
Now, sit back and take a listen as Bob and Irreverent D talk law.
Welcome to the Bob and Irreverent D Talk Law podcast. Thank you for joining us
Welcome.
again. This podcast, we are covering the Young Thug trial, which amazingly,
It's like the Energizer Bunny.
it just keeps going. It just keeps going. We are now in June, and the trial has still not begun.
Right.
The last we checked, or the last we saw, they're still doing jury selection.
Yeah, and people are like, why is it so expensive to hire a lawyer? Because of situations
Like this.
Like, it's taken 6 months to pick a jury.
To pick a jury.
Right.
That's right. In today's episode, we're going to be covering the Young Thug trial, his request for bond, and bond issues. We're going to be talking about jury selection a little bit, and we're going to be talking about what the Rolling Stone article describes as a racially motivated stigma against rap artists.
Fair enough.
All right, so we'll get into the news. You ready?
Do it.
All right.
And now, the news.
Okay, so the news about that we're covering today is about Young Thug, a.k.a. Jeffrey Williams.
Yes.
Jeffrey.
He's a fine young man.
He's a fine young man. Completely misunderstood, I'm sure.
I think so.
You would.
I like his music.
Okay, very good. So, there are two things that we want to talk about in this. One is there's a Rolling Stone article from a couple weeks ago.
Right.
Rolling Stone covers this issue that you and I have talked about, and we're going to talk about again because it's super important, and that is about bond.
Right.
First of all, you need to understand every time some lawyer tries to describe what bond means to me, my eyes glaze over. I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about other than someone has to pay a lot of money or put up grandma's house.
Right.
That's all I know about bond. We're going to talk about that. But what the news article says is that Mr. Thug, his attorney, has requested bond, and bond has been denied for the third time.
Yes.
So, criminal defense lawyer extraordinaire,
Sure.
Dwayne Singleton, Irreverent D, tell us, what does it mean to request bond?
So, first of all, the truth behind it is that DAs,
District attorneys, prosecutors, okay.
and prosecution-minded judges, which most of them are kind of bent towards the prosecution.
What? What are you talking about?
They were former DAs.
Oh, and they're also elected because they're like tough on crime,
elected, tough on crime. I got to be hard on it.
right? Generally speaking, if you're a resident of the county, you want a judge who's tough on crime.
Right.
And judges tend to run on that.
Right. And
okay.
as a defense attorney, our thing that we tell the judge at this point, while he's just been arrested on this warrant, okay, he is not guilty of anything. He is innocent until we have a trial. Okay?
That's right. Be tough on him later.
Be tough on him later.
If you have to.
But what judges
you won't
say
have to, right?
Is, well, these are really terrible. The DA gets up and he says, Mr. Thug does not need a bond because they murdered and they raped and they pillaged and they killed and they're a criminal organization. They got lots of money and they can flee. And the judge goes, I agree. Bond denied. Okay. Then what happens is the defendant is stuck in jail until his case is tried. So it puts the...
How long is that?
Could be 2 or 3 years.
They have to sit in jail because the judge, based on the allegations by the prosecutor, the judge thinks that they did something horrible and they're a threat to society. They need to stay in jail.
Right.
They hadn't even been tried yet.
Correct.
How,
And so,
how is,
you know,
wait a minute. How is that even, isn't that like not constitutional?
Well, I agree that everybody should have a bond. I think it should be preset. They should be written down, and whatever you're charged with, you just get a bond and you get the bond out and go home.
What if you murdered your wife and children? Like that, I don't think that you shouldn't you stay in jail?
You're not guilty at that point,
Okay.
right? You haven't been found guilty
okay.
of a crime.
All right. Okay.
Let's say that
Fair
person is charged with murdering their wife and kids,
No.
goes to trial and gets found not guilty.
Well, then they can get out of jail.
Okay. But they've had to spend 2 years of their life waiting for this case to go to trial.
Yeah.
So after 90 days of being in jail without a bond, you're supposed to have another bond hearing. And then the judge has to have a really good reason to not give
So there's
you
like a
bond.
presumption that you should be able to go out on a bond.
Right.
Okay.
If they haven't indicted you, if they haven't moved forward on the case within 90 days, they have to give you a bond. So what the DA's office does to get around that is they
Stop banging on the table.
Sorry.
Yeah, Producer Steve's going to have your ass.
they take the case to the grand jury to get the indictment. Okay. Then
Why don't
once-
they just indict? Can't
So-
they just indict you themselves?
Well, the grand jury has to indict certain crimes, right?
Oh, okay. All right, gotcha.
So
So you can't just take it in front of a judge and say, we're accusing him of this crime. He's been indicted.
right. So
All right.
once the 90 days is passed and they haven't indicted you, then they have to give you some sort of bond. Okay? So to get around that, what they do is they fast-pace the case. They get in front of the grand jury. They get the indictment. And they're like, Judge, we'll be ready to try this case in a month.
The prosecutor says
Prosecution,
it.
right?
Right.
So we're not going to have a bond. That's it. You sit in jail the whole time. So what that does is the whole defense team who's trying to defend this case, your investigators, your lawyer, the family, they have to go to the jail to talk to the client. The client has to call you on a recorded jail phone.
Yeah, I wondered about
Right?
that.
And so you have to ask for special permission for them, to get in touch with you. So it's private. In most places, they require you to actually go to the physical jail, sit with them and meet them, right? And so just to have a private phone call, sometimes you might have to drive, to Cobb County, go into the back, and then you're still on a video monitor, which is crazy. You should be able to do that from your desk, right? But they don't allow that because they record all your phone calls and stuff out of the jail.
Wait a minute. So you're saying if you have a client
Yes.
that's up here in Cobb County, you're down in Spalding County,
Yeah.
you can call them, but if you talk to
They
them,
can call me,
they can call you.
but it's recorded.
How is that? Okay, got it. But if you want to actually talk to him
In private.
and not be recorded,
Right.
you have to come all the way up to Cobb County.
Right.
And then you're basically on a Zoom call with him anyways?
Then I sit in a little room with a computer monitor and talk to him privately through that monitor.
Is he sitting across from you? Or he's
No.
in some other room?
Some other
So they could do it. You could actually do it from
100%.
your own office.
And during COVID, we made exceptions. There were jails that had iPads that they would pass around, and you could call that iPad and ask to speak to a certain inmate, and they'd bring it. But they've done away with all that now that we're back to normal, right?
Gotcha.
And the reason why they want to keep you in jail, if you're out of jail on bond, the reason why they make you come to all these calendar calls and all these appearances is because they want to revoke your bond. They want to put you back in jail to sit there, because if you got to wait 2 years for trial, you're much less likely to go to trial if they're offering you some sweet probation and you can just get out and go home and live your life.
You have to reset your life, but at least you're not living your life in a jail cell.
Right.
So with this Mr. Thug,
Yes.
he's been denied bail,
Yes.
denied bond 3 times.
Right.
Do you know what the reason is?
They're saying that has one, because this is a RICO action, so it's a criminal enterprise, right? So we got multiple people, but the main thing with him is they're just saying his resources. That these are serious charges. He's looking at serious amount
He's
of
a
time.
menace to society.
But not only that, he's got the money and power that he can leave.
Oh, that he can flee the jurisdiction. He can
I can
pack up and go
he can rent
to
a jet
Venezuela.
and just in the cab, PDK, and be in South America and be gone, and we won't be able to get him back up here.
Well, I mean, at least then he won't be, endangering the lives of Fulton County residents.
But if you listen to his rap music, he has to stand trial.
Right. Okay. Gotcha. He has to stand trial because there is what the Rolling Stone article says. We're going to talk about this now.
Right.
A racially motivated stigma against rap that has hindered his presumption of innocence.
Right.
Is this true?
I think so, because
I mean, it sounds like BS to me, but okay. We'll talk about why I disagree later.
I think that people get villainized, rappers especially, because they talk about fighting with the police, killing the police, selling drugs, doing whatever, okay?
They glorify criminal enterprises?
Right.
Okay, gotcha.
Just like
That does tend to stigmatize somebody.
yeah. Grand Theft Auto, right? The
Right?
video game,
Yeah, the video
right?
game. This is a video game where you can role play carjacking.
Pick up a prostitute, go to a strip club,
Right.
rob somebody's house, murder somebody, yeah.
Yeah.
And, the argument is that they're just playing a part. This is something that's popular amongst culture, just like horror movies, right? We don't actually go out and become serial killers. But it's just a part they're playing. And they're like, no, these are criminal enterprises. We need to shut them all down.
Okay. I mean, I can see both sides of that argument, but I can't see criminalizing somebody playing Grand Theft Auto.
Well, I mean, I understand that, but
Yeah.
I don't see criminalizing somebody listening to rap music or somebody singing rap music or
Okay.
performing rap music, right?
Right.
I
But
mean-
we're also not talking about. But they're also not criminalizing it. What Rolling Stone is complaining about is that there's a stigma, right? I'm guessing what they mean is that potential jurors think that people who rap must be criminals because
They listen to rap.
because they talk about doing criminal things all the time in their lyrics,
Sure.
right? Sorry, that's my bias. Maybe I'm biased. Maybe I'm unfairly biased against him. But if he
So there's a problem, I think, and the jury system, I think, is the best system in the world, and I think they get it right more times than they get it wrong. But
you only think that way because you win all the time,
you're supposed to have a jury of your peers, right?
right?
And in most situations, or in a lot of situations, they're not, right? This guy grew up poor, and they are middle class, and this guy grew up without a father, and these people came from a household with 2 parents, and this guy dropped out in 4th grade, and the people in the jury all are college graduates. Like, they're not juries of their peers, right? And so because they have a different cultural background, I think it's difficult sometimes for people to understand, like, well, why didn't he just roll down the window and talk to him? Why didn't he just comply when the officer told him to get out and get on the ground? Why did he have to get lippy with him? Well, because where he grew up, it's different. Like, going to jail for something stupid may mean losing your whole life over a speeding ticket.
Right.
Right? Because you don't have the resources or the ability to pay it, and other people can't see that. And I do think there is a racial divide there, but in order for there to be a Batson challenge to the jury, then it has to be that the prosecutor is just picking people solely or removing people solely based on race, and that's very difficult to prove when you're picking your jury.
Right. So the next, I guess, part of that, right? You talked about. What I want to pick up on something that you said, and that is when the police officer requests for you to do something, right? And there's we've talked about this before, but I want to pick that thread back up again. Like, there's a difference between an inquiry,
right,
versus a lawful command.
Correct.
Right. And so what is the difference?
And it's different by case law from state to state. Okay. So just because something is okay in Georgia doesn't mean it's okay in California. So if I tell you in Georgia, ma'am, do you mind stepping to the back of the car? I want to have you take some tests to make sure you're safe to drive. Okay.
Okay.
That is a request.
Here in Georgia.
Yeah. Do you mind? Can you step back here?
I'd be glad if you did.
I want to make sure. Right.
Okay.
Because the officer can't compel them to do these tests or to give evidence against themselves.
Okay.
They have to freely do it.
All right.
Okay.
Ma'am, can I come in and look around?
Right.
All right.
And
Fair
so
enough.
the problem is when people say, and officers get confused about this too, okay? The person says, do I have to? Okay? And the officer goes, no, you don't have to. Or some of them say, yeah, if you want to drive away from here, you got to. I got to make sure you're safe to drive.
Right.
Right?
If you know what's good for you,
If you know what's good for you,
should.
would, right?
Right. What do you have? What possibly do you have to hide? Why would you not want to answer my question?
Right.
Right.
And so then when the officer says, so ma'am, you're not going to step back here to take my test? And she goes, no, I'm not. You have no right to stop me. You have no right for pulling me over. I know my rights. Okay? And he says, ma'am,
You are interfering with.
ordering you
Okay.
to step out of the car. Okay? At that point, we've gone from a request to a lawful command.
Okay.
If you don't follow the lawful command, you've committed a crime. Okay? Right? Now the question,
Even if the lawful command was wrong,
Well, that's the
ma'am, I
problem.
order you to come out here and take your clothes off.
Right.
Right? Like, I mean,
that's the problem.
It still has to be
the
legal.
lawful command legally something he can
but then
do?
you have lawyers arguing about it.
So then the
after
officer
fact,
will
right?
say, well, I needed to get her out of the car because I need to do it for officer safety, right?
Mm-hmm.
I need to make sure there weren't any guns. She was acting weird. I was scared, so I needed to move her out here.
We call these, in lawyer terms, post hoc rationalizations.
But the problem is you have
Right.
to argue those in court, not on the side of the road, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So when officer says, hey, do you mind taking some field sobriety examinations? I need to test your eyes, make sure you can walk and turn. And you go, nah, I ain't going to do that. And he says, ma'am, get out of the car.
then it just converted to a lawful command.
Now I've converted to a lawful command. Then you say, F you, officer, I ain't getting out of shit. And then roll your window back up. And he takes out his baton and busts your window out and drags you
He's completely justified.
across it because you haven't followed a lawful command.
So, I've read these cases where, one, there's a guy driving by the police
Right.
who says, F the police,
Right.
right? And the police decide, no, you're not, that's not going to happen today.
Case, actually.
Right?
Right.
And this case went all the way, this fact pattern went all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States.
Right.
And the Supreme Court said, you're free to express your disdain
Right.
for the police officers and them not arrest you for it.
Well, and not only that, it says the police need to expect it. Right? That people are going to be
I
unhappy.
forgot about that part, yeah.
Yeah, that people are going to be unhappy with you when you're arresting Aunt Judy or Cousin Bill.
Right.
And they might say, F the police, right? But that's different than me cussing in front of small children,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And I see officers all the time, they're like, I can make you do whatever I want you. No, you can't, right? You have to
Right.
have a reason to do that. And you may not have had a reason. He may not have a reason to continue to detain you. But that's something you have to argue later on when you get to court, not necessarily there at the side of the road, which is tough for people because you don't want to go to jail, right?
Right.
I'm invoking my right. I don't want to take these tests. Now the officer has to decide, do I have enough information to make an arrest? Yes or no? Most of the time it's no. He's pulled you over, asked for your license and driver's license. You haven't done anything at that point. But then you start mouthing off and you won't get out of the car when he asks you to step to the car for officer safety.
Then he's looking for something.
Then he's got a reason to arrest you.
Oh, even if you're refusing to comply with a polite request?
You can absolutely refuse those tests. He can't arrest you for refusing those tests. That's where I said officers get confused.
Right.
So I've had officers say, well, it's obstruction because I was doing my investigation and she refused to take those tests. No, she has a constitutional right to refuse those tests.
And not to be unlawfully detained, right?
And so she has an absolute right to do that. You know, in a perfect world, the officer would go, you know what, you're right. I really don't have anything else. Let me go ahead and write you that ticket for following too closely. Have a nice day. But that rarely happens because now we're in a pissing contest. And
Right, now you got ego involved. You got somebody who's being disrespectful of the police.
Right. But you don't have to answer any questions. You don't have to, participate in any field sobriety evaluations, walk and turn, one leg stand, eye test, breath test. You don't have to do any of those type of things. And a lot of people feel like they have to, right? Because the officer says, well, I got to make sure you're safe to drive. Well, that sounds reasonable.
Right.
He's got to make sure I'm safe
Very
to drive.
reasonable.
I even had a case that I won a couple of weeks ago where the officer said, well, if I just let you go, then I could get sued. So you got to take these tests. That's not a correct statement, right? That's not a correct statement of the law. You don't have to take the test. It's not necessarily going to get him sued if he lets you go, that kind of thing.
Well, okay. I mean, I can see a scenario, though, where that might be true, right? If you take it to its, ridiculous extent.
Right.
Right? The drunk person who's allegedly drunk.
Right.
Whose trial you won. Right? That person. Right? The police officer doesn't require them to take a sobriety test. They are, in fact, drunk. Hypothetically.
Right.
They go and hurt somebody. That somebody comes see me. Right? And they say, oh, this person, hit me. And I said, well, they don't have any insurance. Do you have any insurance? They say, no, I don't have any insurance either. No insurance. Okay. Well, let's sue the police officer because it's like dram shop, right? You went to the bar. You went to the bar. You shouldn't have the bartender shouldn't have let you go. Of course, that lawsuit's not going to go anywhere.
Well,
but if that person has $300 in a crayon, he could be sued. Sure.
And you're right, because the officer does have something else in his tool bag, okay? If he feels like he has enough to detain you, and he's got enough probable cause, he can request a warrant for your blood. So he can get on the phone with the magistrate and say, hey, I got this guy here. He's drunker than Cooter Brown. He was driving all over the road. He can hardly speak. Couldn't get his license out of the inside of his wallet. Handed me a picture of his wife. Like, this guy is unsafe. I asked him if he'd do walk and turn. He said no. Asked him if I could check his eyes. He said no. Asked him to get out of the car. He said, F the police.
Right.
Okay.
Magistrate judge says.
Magistrate judge says, done.
All right.
Boom, boom, signed off on it. You got a
Take
warrant.
you to the hospital.
Boom. You got a warrant for his blood. Take him, go strap him down, take it by force if you got to. So you're right. The officer does have other things he can do. Right.
I mean, based on just what you described that he would say to the magistrate, well, couldn't he just arrest them anyways? Like, you don't need the breathalyzer. You don't need the test.
He could. Yeah. He could say, look, driving was bad.
He was weaving all over
the place.
His eyes were all over the place.
He admitted to drinking alcohol. I asked him how much he had to drink. He said he had some earlier. And they could, arrest you and charge you with DUI.
Right. They want it to stick, though, which is why they want some kind of test that will be, otherwise a clever lawyer like you will get them off. You don't want me coming in there and saying, hey, the reason why we're here is because had he called the magistrate up at 2 a.m. and got a warrant for his blood, y'all'd have a blood test and we wouldn't be here. So what happened in your trial where the jury found in favor of your client?
So in that trial, a very similar situation, guy admitted to drinking, but there was no bad driving. He was stopped just on a speeding. So speeding is not considered bad driving.
Speeding like he was going a couple miles an hour over the speed limit.
Right.
Speeding.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you think it was contextual?
I think the biggest thing in this case, though, is the guy looked great on video.
Okay.
Client looked great on video.
He wasn't slurring or anything.
I mean, had a little southern drawl, but it was nothing different than how he normally talks. But the officer had messed up the HGN test where they test the eyes. I couldn't get him to admit to that, so I had to cross-examine him on some manuals. I'd asked for him to bring his own manuals. He didn't bring them.
He looked like a doofus on the stand.
He looked like a doofus on the stand. My guy was overweight, so he's not supposed to perform the walk and turn or the one-leg stand because he's like 100 pounds overweight. He doesn't take that in consideration. He doesn't remember that's in his training manual. We show him in the training manual. He denies that that's the manual that he was trained on, which I just think was just a terrible move.
Was he not prepared by the prosecutor? Like,
No.
doesn't the prosecutor know? Okay, look, you're going up against Mr. Singleton. Like, mind your P's and Q's. Don't say BS, right? Like, if there's something that's obviously true, make sure you say it. Otherwise, he'll make you look stupid.
Right.
They don't.
So he had done the fields, the walk and turn, one leg stand, and check the eyes. But, guy did great. What you can see on video is great.
Were there parts that weren't on video?
Well, the officer's going, raised his hands for balance, missed step 9.
He's narrating it?
Yes. And so when you go back and, but when you cross-examine the officer and you ask him.
He's like talking into the microphone.
So
missed step 9.
So let me make sure we understand what it means. When you say raise your hands for balance, they only have to be off your side, right? So it's not raise your hand for balance. It's he took his hands off.
You don't have to do the Karate Kid. Okay.
Did you tell him he couldn't take his hands off his side? No, I did not. Okay. When you said he missed step 9, that's because when he started off on his right foot and ended up on his left foot, he had to take an extra step to turn around, right?
Yeah.
So that's 9 steps out and 9 steps back. You're being petty. Well, it's right.
He had to take an extra step, otherwise it would have been an uneven number of steps.
Right.
Okay, I got you.
And he did a military turn instead of your small. It was just a little stupid nitpicky.
We did
stuff.
like about face,
right?
Like about face thing.
Yeah, and so and then
your client did. Was he being funny with him or what?
No, he was just following the rules. He was super polite.
About face.
And I think that's what a lot of people get confused about. Yeah. If you can just be polite and nice, and act right, you have a much better chance of winning your case.
Right, but it shouldn't have to be like that if you're not drunk, right?
I agree, and I understand people that want to test, the Constitution and want to, hey, I'm not giving you any evidence.
Right.
Done. Driver's license? Nope.
Just make sure you
insurance card? Nope.
Yeah.
Just make sure you understand that you might be going to jail.
And you're going to have to get your checkbook out.
To hire an attorney to go fight and say he has the absolute right to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is silly.
You can fight for your rights, but it's going to cost you money. Probably
so,
time.
And then people are like, well, that's not fair. It's not right. Well, I get it.
Well, life is like that.
Yeah.
Right? There's all kinds of things that aren't fair. I want to go back to one other thing before we wrap up.
But no, they should give Young Thug a bond so he can get out and fight his case.
What? No, he shouldn't.
Yes, he should.
Keep
absolutely.
him in jail the whole time.
No.
Look, that's the only way that he's going to actually tell the truth.
I guarantee you, I will bet good money that Brian Steele will not have him testify. Okay. I may be wrong.
Yeah, I can't take that.
All right.
I can't take that. All right. Now, I want to go back to something you said earlier that I was curious about. You said it's supposed to be a jury of your peers.
Yes.
Right? And you and I know the answer to this question, but I want to play it out.
Right.
Right? Because if it's supposed to be a, quote, jury of your peers, and your county only has 20% black folks,
right.
Like, why don't you just, like...
some counties are like 5%.
Okay, just say right. 20, though,
yeah.
Right? Shouldn't your jury be of just the black folks?
That's the argument, but no, it's
right.
It's the makeup of your... As long as it's equal to the makeup of your county.
Who decided that's what the rule is?
I think the U.S. Supreme Court, right?
Right. Yeah.
The Batson case.
At some point,
right.
Like somebody came up with that argument that I just made, right? Well, if it's a jury of my peers, it should be all lawyers.
Right. And if
right.
you're going to make a Batson challenge, you got to be prepared to say, hey, this county has this many
Right.
Latinos and this many this, and you got to have the numbers and
Right.
on the jury panel, and they struck X amount and they shouldn't have.
So what the Supreme Court in that case, the name of which escapes me, it's been decades, right? Probably. And is that when we say a jury of your peers, essentially the panel of the jury should be a representative sample
Right.
of the people who live generally in your area.
Right.
Right. So not necessarily that you get to have 12 people who are like you,
Right.
but that there are 12, that there is a panel of people, or there's a pool of people, that the pool of potential jurors is basically consistent with with that demographic in that area.
And unfortunately, in smaller towns, people think, well, if I know the defendant or I know of the defendant, then I shouldn't sit on this jury, which I think is unfortunate sometimes for the defendant, because you'll have people go like, yeah, I know him, I can't be fair or impartial. Okay, just
Because I know he wouldn't do this.
Just because you know him doesn't mean you can't listen to the evidence.
Sure.
And still be fair and impartial. You've got to disclose that you know him.
Sure, because
So
how many
the
times
DA's office
Right.
needs to know. But I have people say, well, he would never do anything like this. I know he couldn't have done anything like this. I just can't be on this jury because I know he's not guilty.
All right, that might be.
And you're like, okay.
Maybe you could temper that down a little bit.
So,
I'm not asking you to lie.
You'll have all the good people on your jury like gone because they're like, he's just the greatest person ever.
And the prosecutor is saying that strike this person for cause.
You think back 200 years ago, everybody knew everybody on the jury.
Right.
Right? You knew everybody. So it's not that you can't know them. You just can't be where you can't be fair and make a fair decision based just on the evidence. And so I get upset sometimes, especially when, like, weed cases, people are like, oh, I can never convict anybody of weed ever, and so they're all getting
disqualified.
kicked off,
Yeah.
and I'm stuck with just people that are like, people that
Throw
smoke
them
weed
all in
need
jail.
to
It's a
spend
gateway
life-
drug. Blah, blah. Yeah. It's the devil's weed.
Right.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Well, that's it for our episode. Another episode in the books. Please make sure that you like our episode, but more importantly, that you subscribe. You click the subscribe button. That you do.
Put your questions and comments down below.
That's right. Ask us questions. We ran out of mailbag questions.
Right.
People are getting lazy, saying, "Well, they're just answering all the questions already. Why should I write in?" So make sure you send us some questions, and make sure you search for us. Dwayne, how can people find you?
You can find me at www.dwaynesingleton.com.
Who says WW anymore?
Me, I
Okay,
just said it.
DwayneSingleton.com.
I mean, Griffin, Georgia, if you need somebody down around that way, hit us up. We'll help you out.
Or even further up north. Right?
Further up
Clayton
north,
County.
anywhere in the state, really.
Henry
Right.
County. All right. And I'm Ben Benson. I'm a personal injury lawyer. If you've been injured, you need to call me. I'll handle your business.
There you go.
Thanks for listening. Tune in next time when Bob and Irreverent D talk law.